There are two games I want to compare. Neverwinter versus Throne and Liberty. The former has been out since 2013. It's a game nearly 12 years old. Throne and Liberty, on the other hand, came out in 2023 in Korea and released globally in 2024. I personally have well over 10,000 hours in Neverwinter across all the years I've played it, starting since 2015, and Throne and Liberty I've pretty much played non-stop since it released globally, coming up on 2,000 hours now. So let's make a bit of a comparison on these 10 topics. First thing is what kind of classes you can play. Well, Neverwinter has the option to choose different races, and if you're not aware, it's got its roots in Dungeons and Dragons. And so all these different races originate from there. Throne and Liberty, however, has no such thing as races right now. You pretty much just go and choose male or female and simply customize your appearance from there. In Neverwinter, you then need to select one of the 9 different classes. Most of these classes can play 2 different roles, whether it's tank, healing, or DPS. 3 of those classes can only play as DPS, meaning damage dealers. Now in comparison, Throne and Liberty has 8 different weapons. However, you need to choose 2 of them. Each weapon gives you a unique skill set, which you then can mix and match depending on which 2 weapons you've chosen. And you ultimately create your own class based on those 2 weapons. And you create your own role, whether you want to fulfill as a tank, damage dealer, or healer. And so it's entirely up to you, and it's completely flexible. With regards to then alternate characters, you do not need any in Throne and Liberty. You can play literally every single class on one character, and that's one of the best things Throne and Liberty has going for it. In Neverwinter, if you want to play a different class, you have to create another character. Neverwinter does also incentivize you to have lots of different characters, to take advantage of different events and activities which benefit you the more characters you have. And so at the very least, I would generally recommend having one of each. And you only get 2 character slots for free when you start the game. Both games, if you're not aware, are completely free to play, so you can try them out literally at any time. But let's move on to the combat feel. And I will straight up say Neverwinter has one of the best combat systems that I've ever experienced. That does come with the bias that I've played this game a lot. Compared to anything else, nothing feels as fluid. Even when I'm playing on an American server, as long as you don't have internet issues, the action combat system feels super fluid and intuitive in Neverwinter. When we compare that to Throne and Liberty, it can honestly feel a bit of a janky mess. Now this is coming from a person who enjoys playing action combat mode, and Throne and Liberty is normally a tab target MMO. I refuse to play as tab target, as that just feels so unimmersive, having to use your mouse cursor to point at certain things to target them. So action mode is the only thing I can stand playing, and I wouldn't play this game if it didn't have that. However, it seriously needs further improvements than what it has. The targeting can continually be an issue, and you end up having to use a dedicated key like tab target to guaranteed target your enemies. However, the combat does feel pretty good with that aside. You can cast your skills while still moving. There are very few that actually lock you down, but it does a good job to make it not feel like floaty, and it does feel pretty satisfying. Of course, different weapons will have different impacts on what experience you have, but nonetheless, I am fairly satisfied with Throne and Liberty's combat. I just again have some issues with the action combat mode and targeting. It could just have a few minor improvements and it would go a long way to my satisfaction with the combat system. But yes, for me, Neverwinter definitely beats it in terms of fluidity and just combat satisfaction. But now let's look at monetization. So Neverwinter, yes, it has a cash shop, and you can argue that it is pay to win. You can buy items here to directly increase the power of your character. In Throne and Liberty, this is exactly the same. You can buy Lucent, which you can then spend directly on the auction house to purchase your gear. However, in both games you can get this premium currency simply by playing the game. So neither game has anything that's exclusive to having to pay real world money. One issue I would have is that exchange rate can be a lot longer than people are willing to wait depending on your platform. That's with regards to Neverwinter. In Throne and Liberty, if you get a good item drop, you can immediately sell it and receive that premium currency as a reward for selling it. Now, in terms of cosmetics, there's a pretty big difference. Neverwinter doesn't really sell cosmetics, and the appearance system that is within the game allows you to change the entire look of your character from all the different gear you collect in the game, and there's like no cost with that. Next to no cost in order to actually change these items. On the other hand, Throne and Liberty monetizes cosmetics and your fashion for your character very heavily. These things come at a significant cost. Consider over 1,000 Lucent is like €20. And they did newly introduce like these illusion scrolls, allowing you to fully customize the appearance of your character based on in-game armor, just like you can say in Neverwinter. But it has an absolute massive price tag. You'll be looking upwards of like €50 equivalent to change the full appearance of your character, versus in Neverwinter it costs you nothing. Now, to make matters worse for Throne and Liberty is the fact it has items which are these weapons that go for thousands and thousands of the premium currency of the game. And there's no real way to farm these other than paying that sheer amount of cost. So what you end up with is people who are able to pay this much obtaining these items, which are then just a bit better than other items you can get in the game. This for me is pretty hard pay to win. A person who can use their credit card on the game, get more premium currency than you can, simply has a better advantage than you, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing like this in Neverwinter. Yes, the cash shop goes and sells items which you can use to upgrade your character, but none of those items are unique. It's like upgrading enchantments, which simply give you flat stat boosts, upgrading insignias, which do the same thing, and only very rarely can you actually buy gear. And you will do so from other players using the regular currency that everybody earns in the game. And even then, none of those items are game changing in any way. They just give you a tiny little bit more of a stat boost. And so compared to Throne and Liberty, Neverwinter is far more mild in terms of pay to win. If you're playing PvP in Throne and Liberty, it will hurt. You have people with those archboss weapons, which cost thousands and thousands, who can just steamroll you because they could use their credit card or they got super lucky with some drops. But let's move on to available content. Well, Neverwinter's been out for nearly 12 years now, and so it's had plenty of time to introduce new content. And if you're familiar with D&D, it has all the different expansions based on all the different adventures you can experience within the D&D universe. So you can have quite a lot of fun if you're familiar to D&D, actually playing through these and finding out the different adaptations that Neverwinter has actually put on them. And there's a lot of story to go through. However, I will say as a newer player, it can be pretty hard to follow the story in a chronological order, and it ends up feeling a bit of a mess. If you compare that to Throne and Liberty, well, you simply have your adventure codex, which you're going to use through leveling up, and you get the overarching story of the game. You can then do additional objectives, and it's pretty straightforward here. I would say Throne and Liberty definitely makes it a lot more clear with regards to questing. Neverwinter, it's a bit of a mess with regards to adventures, time-gated campaigns. But then if we look at all the different dungeons, trials, skirmishes, there's just so much here. Now, not all of it is relevant, but if you're a first-time new player, there's a lot to experience. If you compare that with Throne and Liberty, yes, it also has a pretty big list of dungeons you can go through. Not nearly as much, but it is slowly catching up, and every few updates they're bringing even more. Now that's just PvE content. What Throne and Liberty brings to the table that Neverwinter does not is PvP content. There is a pretty big focus with regards to joining a guild and partaking in PvP events, whether it's taking on boonstones or rift zones as part of a guild. You end up in big fights that can end upwards of 70v70, or castle sieges, which can be upwards of thousands of players all within one area, slaughtering each other and trying to get the throne. And you coordinate your guilds combined with other allied guilds to create like mega alliances, and you end up with just so many people, and it's a lot of fun having that group content. And with it being PvP, it's all player driven then, and no fight will be the same. Again, Neverwinter does not have any of this whatsoever. PvP is completely dead in this game. It does have some, say, PvP queues that you can do, but you will very rarely find a match, and in most cases you're just going to have to host one yourself and take a while to find anybody to actually do it. So overall, in terms of content to play, both games have a lot. I would say Neverwinter has a bit more, just because the game's been out longer, particularly on the PvE side of things, with Throne and Liberty, yes, being miles ahead in the PvP side of things. But do be aware, you can't simply jump into PvP content. You're going to have to first upgrade your character, which requires you playing a ton of PvE first. This is one of the bigger issues in this game. You can't just join and play PvP, you will get completely steamrolled over and over. You will have to spend months working on upgrading your character, and so you will be playing PvE content. You may as well enjoy it. Neverwinter, similarly, you will have to spend months and months playing content, gearing up your character before you reach, say, Endgame. But now let's look at the content update cadence. Well, Neverwinter generally gets a new update every 4 months or so. This brings with it a new campaign, new gear to obtain, a new map area, and essentially a new expansion. Lots of new stuff you can do, with new group content like a trial or a dungeon. And it has been pretty consistent with that over the years. Every 4 months, about 3 times a year, a new major update, a new expansion. Now, if we look at Throne and Liberty and its history, it's currently only had one big expansion since it's been released. And it's been released on Korea since, again, December 2023. It does get kind of minor updates here and there, and we already will be this week coming out with new dungeon, and then the following month a new raid, which is going to be a complete new thing, a 12-man raid. They've not added these to the game before. It could be a complete flop, but we shall see. They do update the game every few weeks with balancing, bug fixes, but in terms of actual content, it seems to be like once every 6 months. This is again versus Neverwinter, which has an update about every 4 months. This could well change a bit because Neverwinter did just get an entire new dev team. But we move on to game events. And this is another area I would say Neverwinter does it far better. But again, that can be just as a result of the game being out for so many years. Every week, pretty much, there's a new event that comes, whether that's a discount event, ×2 currency gained in a certain campaign, an anniversary event to gain you extra rewards, a guild event to give you double currency, and the calendars, again, pretty much always back to back to back events, something extra, something different you can do. But it generally cycles every year the same thing. So if you've played this game a lot, you'll recognize most of them. And it's not necessarily coming out with something new. In Throne and Liberty, they have, as of late, usually had new events. And they have announced a whole bunch coming in the next month as well. And we should be getting them more back to back as well. So I would say both games pretty similar in terms of events. It's just Neverwinter is more tried and tested, and we know when to expect new events and kind of what they are about. Throne and Liberty is more exciting in that way, as we have yet to see what they come up with, as it is all new. Then looking at servers and crossplay, and yeah, unfortunately Neverwinter is not crossplay. If you play on PlayStation and your friend on PC, you cannot play this game together. And that's it. In terms of servers, Neverwinter only has a server in the USA and then like one in Russia. And that's it. That's your only options. In terms of Throne and Liberty, you have servers across all the different regions, and you can usually have one that's pretty good for yourself, except I believe if you're within Australia, you have to play on like the Japanese servers, but everywhere else you usually have a pretty good connection with a good region nearby. And servers seem to be pretty active and doing fairly well. That's fine. Throne and Liberty is crossplay, so if you play with your buddies on consoles and you're a PC player, you can play together. You just need to make sure you create your characters in the same world. As for catching up to Endgame, I may have touched on this earlier, but I would say in Neverwinter, it can take a long time, and there's not a lot that helps you. I wouldn't say it's that important to rush to Endgame in Neverwinter. There's no like PvP that requires you to say be competitive. It's just PvE. And it's like reaching the max difficulty in PvE. When you start this game and you level up to 20, you can already jump to the newest and latest expansion, which with this module is Revved Harvest. Jump into that area, get new gear, get a pretty big boost, but you will always be stuck with enchantments and insignias for quite a while. But once you get over that hurdle, it is generally pretty easy to keep up in this game. Yes, you get a new expansion every 4 months, but even with that, if you play a bit every few days, you generally do not have any problem keeping up. If we look at Throne and Liberty, well, catching up I think is actually pretty easy. At least compared to other games, and compared to Neverwinter, it's also pretty easy. You simply have to get your gear and then you have to work on trading it. And the thing people run into is, yes, if you want to be playing PvP, then it's kind of hard to catch up. But if you just want to play PvE, it's super easy. You don't have to max trade everything, you can take your time with it. And honestly, there's nothing really challenging with PvE content right now until maybe we get raids. You should not have any problem catching up there. But in terms of PvP, that's a big long grind. You have to max trade everything. You have to work on getting your mastery caught up. And this will just take a lot of time. And you might struggle to keep up with new updates releasing, especially if you don't spend any hard cash to get Lucent to be able to get traits. If you're not lucky with getting drops to sell, then that just gets even harder as well, especially as an update ages. Auction house prices on those certain items just completely plummet, and it gets even harder to make any of that Lucent. But again, versus Neverwinter, Throne and Liberty is far easier to get to endgame with regards to PvE. But in terms of PvP, again, Neverwinter doesn't really have any PvP. Throne and Liberty is still quite a big grind in order to be competitive in PvP. And I would also warn you, if you want to be competitive in PvP, you need a static party. You ideally need a group of friends to play. Otherwise, you're stuck in just random Dominion events, spawn camping people if that's what you enjoy, or jumping into 3v3 arena. But now we look at, say, graphics, and I would say, yeah, no doubt, Throne and Liberty blows the graphics out of the park compared to what Neverwinter has. Again, Neverwinter created back in like 2013, and the graphics have not really been updated much since then. They've done a few lighting improvements, which has helped a bit, but in terms of the quality of the assets and all that, nothing has really been done. There's been no overhaul, no engine update, none of that. Throne and Liberty will in every way always look better in terms of graphics. Now, I don't even play on very good graphic settings here, just because I'm recording and running multiple instances of different games. So I'm just on medium settings right now. Finally, we look at future projections. Now, people say Throne and Liberty is dead or it's dying, things like that. And I'll tell you, Throne and Liberty has at least 10 times, if not 20 times, the player base than Neverwinter has. And Neverwinter has survived for nearly 12 years on a dwindling player base and still seems to be pushing out updates pretty regularly, again, like every 4 months. So I don't think Throne and Liberty is going to be dead anytime soon, and I believe this game still has a future of many years to come. With the caveat, I have a hunch PvP may very well die out. They have been making changes to accommodate more casual players, like coming out with peace portals on bosses, making it a lot more fair with regards to PvE players being able to get as much loot as, say, PvP players. There's no real big advantage to actually playing PvP content in this game, other than Nebula Island, especially when rewards get split amongst your guild. And I believe unless that changes, unless they bring some bigger incentive and bigger rewards for PvP, I don't feel it lasting too long. Many people are very unhappy right now with the current meta. It's a bit stale, but the devs had said they'd be changing it up this week with new items and potentially buffs and nerfs to different abilities. Development in Throne and Liberty is very active. The devs generally make changes pretty quick, but there is a lot of unrest in the PvP community right now. In terms of Neverwinter, again, I don't really see this game going anywhere. It's lasted nearly 12 years. I think it's going to last another 4 or 5 years. Could well. Again, it's very closely tied with Dungeons and Dragons, and there's very little games that are. Unless there's a new MMORPG that comes out that's very close to D&D and mirrors what this game has, I don't see Neverwinter going anywhere. They did just get an entire new dev team, which does show that there are higher ups that believe this game has promise. And they aren't switching to any like bad practice pay to win, what people would call as like cash grabs. They seem to still be sticking very true to how it's always been in the majority of years prior. Yes, you can buy currency, you can skip ahead with your progress, but you can't directly buy power in the way of items that you can't otherwise obtain in the game, especially not like Throne and Liberty, buying an arch boss weapon. But that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully this was somewhat insightful, my take on Neverwinter versus Throne and Liberty in the different categories. So thanks all for watching, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.